For those of you who do not know Gina Miller, you're meeting one of the most exceptional women in this country today. Gina is not a politician. She is in many respects the antidote to politics. It's very hard when you look at most politicians today and you seek truth, you seek transparency, you seek integrity, and you get none of that. We live in a country which has possibly the worst conservative government in modern political history. Epsom and Ewell had a conservative candidate here who, from what I understand, I've never met him, was a very decent and honorable guy. But he brought a new meaning to the term incompetence. Now, he's going to be replaced by somebody who thinks Liz Truss is competent. This is the woman who lasted for the shortest period of time any government has lasted and trashed £500 billion of your pension money by creating a budget which he hadn't even had the decency to approach people and say, can we afford this? No, we couldn't. The Bank of England had to come in as if it was 2008 and bail us out. We do not need that kind of person back in government. We need someone who's been a campaigner all of her life, for people in care, because Gina has a clear understanding of those of us who've been born without all of the faculties that normal people take for granted. Gina is aware of what it is to be a woman in a male-dominated society where the police still don't come quickly enough when women are challenged. Gina has stood up publicly. The audacity of a government to say not only are we leaving the EU, but we're doing it by way of a referendum. Well, if we had referendums every day, we'd agree to hang people and flog them. We have an elected parliamentary democracy, and if you want to leave something or join something, you do it in an open and transparent way. And Gina Miller was the woman who took this government to court twice and beat them twice. We need people like Gina in politics. We need her because she has capabilities, integrity, ideas, and above all, she will genuinely make a difference. I want you to listen to her tonight. I want you to challenge her tonight. And hopefully you'll come out of here tonight thinking, this is the woman that I want to represent me and my children and my family in Epsom and Ewell. Ladies and gentlemen, Gina Miller.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming this evening, so many of you. This evening is about me setting out my vision for Epsom and Ewell and why I believe that I can bring a different future for you and your children. Thank you, Ian, as always, for your incredibly kind introduction. There is no denying that as we approach the next general election, there is much to be concerned about. Today, almost every sector of our community and our country needs fixing. The convergence of crises we face are everywhere. Instead, we hear from established parties, political stunts, political PR, tinkering, and tweaks. The state of our countries and communities demand a fundamental shift in our economic system. But it is not just us. Around the Western world, we are all suffering and grappling with issues such as an aging population, sluggish growth and productivity, major changes to the way we work, and the spectre of climate change. But here in the UK, there are additional, really startling trends. A shocking rise in poverty and food banks, with 22% of our population living in poverty, according to last year's data. When the Conservatives came to power in 2010, there were 35 Trussell Trust food banks. By 2022, there were 2,600 food banks in our country, and that is not including soup kitchens and social supermarkets. Last year, the Trussell Trust alone handed out 3 million food parcels. This is in Britain, the Britain we live in and we love. The Good Company here in Epsom and Ewell produced food parcels for 10,720 people last year, compared to just 6,116 in 2020. And they say every week, every day, things are getting worse. So-called Victorian diseases, scurvy, rickets, malnutrition are back in our country and at all-time highs. 80% of our teachers are saying that children are coming to school hungry at least once a week, sometimes every day. And UNICEF has actually started now sending food to our children in our country. This hurts me as much as I'm sure it hurts you, and leads to the question, why are we here? How did we get here? And why are we letting this continue? In our working population, there are 2.6 million people on waiting lists to see the NHS, but have to wait something like 2 to 3 years. Against this reality, it is easy not to have any hope, to give up on politics, to just live day to day and look after our families. But I'm not giving up. I'm going to fight, and I hope you will fight with me. What we need to do is look at how do we change this. And I believe that by embracing a concept of a well-being economy as a path to the future for our communities, we can have a healthier, happier, more hopeful and productive society. Collaborations between public, private and charities that bring services back into the center of our community. I believe that if we work together here in Epsom and Ewell, we won't just read reports that sit on a shelf. We can actually be the place where we pioneer blueprints for a better future. That is my pitch to you in Epsom and Ewell. Let's stop talking about what is possible. Let's start doing what is possible. Let's look to the future, because we cannot shy away from technology, which will mean in the future, for every 25 jobs, there'll be one. For the fact that we have an aging population, that the public purse, our NHS, and our care sector cannot look after if there's no one paying taxes. We have to be the ones who step up. And that is what I'm proposing that we do as a community, that we come together, that we propose the future here in Epsom and Ewell by pioneering solutions. We have 5 years, if you elect me as your MP, to put Epsom and Ewell on the map as being the home for hope and happiness. And for those of you who might think that sounds a little bit woolly, when you go on our website that goes live tomorrow morning, you will see all the academic evidence of why this works. That healthier, happier communities are more productive, are more creative, are more innovative, and are less of a burden on our public services. But don't just believe me. There are 21 countries around the world who are embracing this, who are actively looking at a well-being economy as a place for the future. And again, don't just believe me. That our economic model is broken and actually delivers inequality rather than trickle-down equality. Back in 1933, John Maynard Keynes said that the model we have is not beautiful, it is not virtuous, it is not equal, it is not delivering. But he ended his quote by saying, "But what takes its place?" 90 years later, I say a wellness economy is what takes its place, where we put the lens of health and happiness across all policy areas. Healthy earth, healthy food, healthy water, healthy education, healthy services, where we do not just become aggressive takers, but kind, compassionate givers. That is my pitch to you. That is my vision for Epsom and Ewell. The place that we had the biggest mental health institutions in Europe has a provenance for being able to heal people. We can heal the community if we work together. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Because look at the alternatives out there. Tell me what Labour's vision is for the future. Tell me what the Lib Dems' vision is for the future. Tell me what the Conservatives' vision is for the future. They're only interested in winning an election and taking power. They do not care about people first, about your children and their futures. I believe we have a responsibility to be the stewards of a future that our children will inherit and flourish in. Come with me, and together I think we can win. It is not going to be easy, but at least we should try. That is what I'm asking you. Help me try and win a better future for our children. We have here tonight some boards, as Ian said, some post-it notes. Please put your ideas up there of the things that concern you, of how you think we can make this happen, how you can volunteer and help us. There is a possibility in this coming general election to start a new path. Don't be downtrodden, don't be depressed, don't be apathetic. I'm telling you, if we come together, we can be the change. That is what I'm asking you tonight. Thank you very much. And I'll get Ian to take some questions.
We want lots of questions from you. Can I please ask, not speeches, and if you've got anecdotes relevant to your question, short ones.
I noticed on your leaflet, you said one of your objectives was to modernise politics.
Yes.
I wondered if there was a particular focus in politics that you were interested in and how you would set about modernising it.
So yes, hello, it's a very good question. So we have obviously the local pitch for Epsom and Ewell, but nationally, we have to put checks and balances for our MPs. So the first three things I would advocate is that the Nolan principles are put on a legal footing, that MPs have a contract of employment. We all have one, why don't they? Third thing is that the prerogative powers for a prime minister is put also on a legal footing. So those are the three quick wins that would actually change the way our politics works.
When we all go canvassing and we knock on those doors on behalf of Gina, when the person who answer that door says, "What can Gina Miller give to me that my Conservative MP hasn't given to me?" what should we say to that person?
That an MP has two jobs already. One is being in Parliament as somebody who scrutinises legislation and doesn't just vote with collective responsibility and no conscience. And the second is that you'd actually, as MP for Epsom and Ewell, I will actually stand up for Epsom and Ewell rather than in 23 years only mention the area 10 times.
When you look at the national crime statistics, I think 94% of crimes in England and Wales weren't resolved or by the police last year. How would you go about improving that?
There's an awful lot of underinvestment in our police force and in our justice system. Part of it is because you don't see the police on the streets. One of the things we've got very wrong, I believe, in this country is we have police doing administration. Police officers should actually be seen on the street in the communities. And what we should be investing in is a separate arm that does administration in the police force. A lot of other countries separate those two things. The other thing I would do is actually have a connected IT system so that if somebody commits a crime in one part of the country, they are tracked to the other part of the country. We do not have a database in this country that talks to each other. If somebody who's a pedophile in the north changes their name and comes to the south, it is not recorded. There's an awful lot of things we need to do. And then the other thing, of course, is community policing. We've got to get back to community policing.
What are the main components of the wellness economy that you envision?
So wellness economy is basically that you work in partnership. Businesses understand that it's not just for profit, so that they could actually give back to their community. And you introduce tax reliefs to encourage them to do that. So when, for example, so much of shopping and retail is going online, the services you're going offline into the center of the community are care services, respite services, early intervention services. So all of the children now, nearly 1.3 million waiting for CAMS appointments for 2 to 3 years, when by that time, their whole lives, their pain is already embedded and will last their whole lives and affect them. What you do is you have music therapy in the center, you have art therapy in the center, you bring early intervention into the center of the community, and that is then funded by a transaction tax instead of business rates.
It strikes me that not only politicians, but also businessmen and charities always are asking either to spend more, reduce taxes. So, I mean, you've just mentioned improving the police force's computer systems. That would cost money.
Yep.
How would you do that? Would you raise taxes? In which case, which taxes? Would you reduce expenditure from other areas? In which case, which expenditure? Would you increase debt?
Well, first of all, you close all the tax loopholes. If you live in this country, you should pay tax. If you are renting property, first of all, let's collect the taxes that are not being collected in this country. There's an awful lot of them. Then I'd also say that what we have to also do is as going back to the transaction tax, all these businesses, Amazon, all the businesses who are earning a huge amount of money in our country should be paying taxes in our country. So, for example, closing just the non-dom loophole, that's 10.8 billion that would come into our economy every year. If we also have a different sort of system of taxing for luxury tax, and we take away, for example, reducing taxes on things that are not luxury to 5%, but increasing it on the luxury end. So you have a differential VAT tax. In fact, every single tax you can think of needs reforming because they were all designed in a former age. But the other thing that's very important is inward investment. To spend, you have to do one of three things: increase taxes, increase productivity, or increase debt. We have to address our sluggish productivity in this country. We have to address the fact that we are training people who then leave our country. So incentivizing people who are leaving university to go into public service, for example, by cancelling their student debt if they stay in the UK for more than 7 years and work in our industry and public services is something we would recommend. So we have to find ways of stabilizing our country so we get foreign investment. At the moment, we're seen as a basket case, and foreign investment is at an all-time low. Last year, the year before, there is no reason. I don't speak to any businesses abroad who say that they feel that Britain is a country that they have confidence in. And without confidence, we will not get foreign investment. So there are a number of things we need to do. And a lot of it does start, going back to the lady's question, with actually having a stable and sound political system and parliamentary democracy. The way we are operating at the moment does not give foreign investors confidence in our country.
Gina, I cannot wait to have an MP in this constituency that actually wants to represent Epsom and Newell. The issue of education in this area seems very misted in, or very difficult to get to the bottom of. Trusts have appeared from nowhere over the last 14 years. They're answerable to nobody. They spend lots of public money How would we deal with that? Because education is such an important issue for this area, because it ranges from Epsom College to the local authority primary schools we have in this area. And money is really important, and education is exceptionally important in this part of the world.
I would say education is important to every region of our country, because unless we have an educated population, I mean, it is the key to success. Education is so important, and we have a very outdated education system. Before I answer your question locally, one of the things, we're about to publish our education paper in a couple of weeks' time. And the sort of things we're proposing on there, for example, is a 4th term, where our children, because if you have money, you go to summer school, you go to tennis school, you go to tennis club, you have all these wonderful privileges. Yet in the summer, we know that there's statistics of being recruited by crime, by gangs, by not being fed. The statistics are there. And also, when I say a 4th term, we are proposing a 4th sensory term. So you do all the subjects that actually create a mind and a sense of confidence in individuals. So short sensory term that teaches art, music, gardening, all the other things that make you a whole human being. But when it comes to locally, there is something very disturbing happening with both the trusts, but also academies. There is very little transparency. So the first thing we'd say is that there needs to be an overhaul of Ofsted to then give them the powers to look at all institutions, because at the moment, Ofsted is not fit for purpose. And we have to start with the regulator for the sector.
You mentioned in your video about building on brownfield sites. I just wanted to know how you propose to protect the green belts in Epsom and Ewell.
Well, the first thing we should do is stop the plan that's coming in next year, because it's based on outdated, incorrect data. There's no transparency about the officers who actually inputted into it. There are far too many questions about that plan. So it should actually be pushed back in all its form. And that's one of the things that I'm looking into, is because we're not getting the answers that are required to know how the plan came about. And then there also needs to be an audit on brownfield sites. But what is the most worrying, well, there's so many things worrying about the plan that's coming forward, but it doesn't appear to have done 2 very basic things. One is that environmentalists and scientists were not involved. So building on floodplains seems the most nonsensical plan to have ever come to the table. And secondly, that we have no idea why the consultation doesn't seem to have been legal, because they ignored all the email. We believe they ignored all the email contributions. And that's actually against the consultation legislation. So there's a big question about how the whole consultation happened and actually the feedback that people are getting. But there should be an audit for brownfield sites. We go brown before we go green. It has to be the way.
This Tory government who have destroyed our country used their catchphrase of take back control, and nothing could be further from the truth. They took control. They wanted control of the people of the country. What would you do? How would you make the people feel part of a new politics going forward, that they feel that they have a power and a voice in how things are decided?
So part of the wellbeing economy is you create mechanisms for local residential input. So you have citizen panels, citizens' assemblies. We have to be able to bridge the gap between people who do not trust politicians or the system and the people. Because at the moment, one of the most disturbing statistics as we go into the general election is the number of people saying they're not going to vote. It is sitting somewhere around 40%. That is not a functioning democracy. So we have to close that gap, and citizens have to be involved in the decision-making process, and that comes through citizens' assemblies. Look what happened in Ireland. It was a fantastic model of what being done. I am not a fan of referenda. I am a fan of citizens' assemblies.
In the last election, you led a campaign for tactical voting. And would you urge people to vote tactically in this election?
I think things have changed. I think it's up to people to decide. But the tactical voting, unfortunately, when I started an organization called Best for Britain, we did the biggest tactical voting campaign in the UK had ever seen in 2017. And then for the 2019 election. But the landscape has changed. There are an awful lot of tactical voting advice platforms out there that are not independent and that are actually recommending their own interests. So I'm afraid the landscape, I believe, has been corrupted. So I would not advise people to look and take heed of all the tactical voting websites. That is my view.
As part of a fairer economy and one that is more inclusive, where do you see the position of taxation and policies with regards to women and things like childcare? Because that's surely still quite an issue for a lot of people.
So if you go onto our website, we actually, in our economic paper, we have 6 pages on a female economy where we talk about there, but you go there. But when it comes to childcare, we have a big problem. We do not have enough provision for childcare at a time when women want to go into the workplace. So it has to be provision not just from the society and also communities, it's also got to be from businesses. So if you look at what's happening in quite a lot of other countries, businesses are coming together and clubbing together to create childcare centers. So there are different models to look at. But the other thing that's really important at the moment to realize in the female economy is that we don't have equity of pay. So that's something, the first thing you have to look at is we need much more transparency in businesses of how they're actually creating their bonus systems, their pay systems, and registers of all those sorts of decisions, which again, there is a charter. There's a charter for transparency on data for pay against women, but it's not operational. It only applies to businesses, I think, over 250 employees. Actually, all businesses over 25 employees should be made to make that data transparent. But I would warn about something which you may not be aware of, is AI. Because the way AI is working is that it's looking at data retrospectively. So it's already got inherent, inbuilt discrimination. And there are an awful lot of cases already, and companies are using AI to put together teams that are excluding women because the AI is only pushing out as good as the data is that it puts in. So there is a massive problem coming ahead when it comes to equity and equality of women that we need to look at in terms of technology and AI.
Having worked in international trade for over 40 years, I'm afraid I've got to ask that question because I'm watching companies close up or go and set up over in Europe because they can't afford to work over here, working here and then having warehousing in different countries and trying to find a way through. The trade and cooperation agreement hasn't really worked at all. We rushed it through, we didn't understand it, but the businesses are suffering for it. We're not getting the exports we need. We're not getting the internationalization we need, and it's shrinking our economy. I know we're getting the big sales from the big defense contracts, but the smaller businesses are suffering. Do you have any ideas about what we can do about Brussels?
Well, on that point, when COVID came, a lot of the checks and balances that were supposed to come in for businesses were actually put on the back burner, and they will come in later this year. So if you think businesses are suffering now, there is much more to come, much more burdens to come later this year. And when I speak to the pharmaceutical industry, they're already saying there's a shortage of about over 100 drugs. There's about another 200 drugs that will be short coming at the end of this year. We're looking at drugs like HRT drugs, menopause drugs, common drugs, generic drugs, painkillers, from what's it called? Diabetes is a massive problem. The drugs, we cannot get those drugs. My daughter is asthmatic. We cannot get asthmatic drugs. There is a massive, massive problem coming because we did not sign up to REACH and we did not sign up to come along to any of the drug or development or RDA. But things are only going to get worse, I'm afraid, later this year when those checks come in. So what do we do when the next government comes in? Because I do believe it will be a Labour government. I don't believe it will be the landslide that people are talking about. And if you don't believe me, I would point you to read some recent articles by Peter Mandelson and John Curtis on that. So if we are heading closer to what I believe is a hung parliament, then the Labour Party has to do something very quickly. In January 2025, it has to activate the renegotiation clauses that sit in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. There are over 200 renegotiation clauses in that agreement that will bring us closer, that will align us. If, however, it is somehow a conservative reform, whatever that looks like, they will go in the other direction and the damage will definitely get worse. Because as my opponent here, Miss Fraser, who believes in trustonomics, says, we will become Singapore on Thames and we will diverge more. We cannot afford to do that.
Completely agree with what you just said, that we need to get rid of this government.
I'm going to put out my pitch. We will see what people say about that. And then when the election's called, whenever that is, I will look at the data, because I will not let the up and rising UK version of Le Pen sit in this seat. I can promise you that.
First of all, I'd like to know about what you're going to do for young professionals in order to be able to keep them in just basically buy a house, buy a flat, buy any sort of roof over their heads that they actually own, as opposed to having to rent at extortionate rates. And the second just comes back to your very interesting video, is you said about working less. That's a slightly contentious issue. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more about what you mean with a well-being economy about working less?
So I'll go to the first one, which is about young people. We do definitely need to bring in for young people rent caps. I mean, it is absolutely outrageous the way private landlords are operating. We also have to look at also getting rid of the ridiculous deposits that they have to pay. I mean, 25% deposits. Who can afford that? They can't afford that. Other thing is to release some more of the properties, is looking to reduce stamp duty for those looking to downsize. When I speak to the estate agents around the community, they say that is one of the biggest reasons why people don't want to downsize and release their property, could then be subdivided and make more accommodation, is the stamp duty. So we have to have incentives to free up properties. There are other measures such as change of usage, because people are just not going to be sitting in offices in the way they have done in the past. Which brings me to the second part of your question. In a world where for every 25 jobs there'll be one, we will be working less, because the jobs of the future are not going to be the jobs we have today. And what AI and our digital revolution is doing, which has not happened before in any revolution, is that it's actually hollowing out the middle class and the professional classes. So that means that there is a possibility, and people already talking about it, that we will be working 3 days a week to give people a chance, especially young people, to have a chance to work and to build up enough equity experience before they can then get on the housing ladder. So the world of work will change dramatically. That is what I meant by working less.
I'm just interested in your thoughts about tower blocks and how that might impact on Epsom's identity and townscape.
The question was, what do I think about tower blocks in Epsom? Well, they're not very pretty, are they? No, there is no need for tower blocks in Epsom. If you look at the audit of available properties, you do not have to go above a certain level. There is no need for it. And I'll go back to that plan. The housing that's needed in the formula that's being used for the housing that's needed in this constituency and all the other constituencies where it's being applied is completely outdated and has not taken into consideration the way people are living and working today. It's based on a census from not the last census, but the 2 before that. It is nonsense and does not make any sense. We almost need to rip it up and start again before we can really understand where we need our housing.
You mentioned about 40% of people are suspected of not being engaged with the political process. Practically, what can be done to engage the disengaged?
So really interesting in that we've done some work looking at how that 40% breaks down. A very big part of it are One Nation Tories, who believe that their party has left them and they won't quite vote for the other party. So they believe there's no choice. So it's about me and my team getting out there and engaging and saying, We believe in fiscal responsibility. We believe in making our country proud. We believe in behaving in a way that brings back principles and honesty into politics. So it's talking to them in a language that they understand. The other demographic is Gen Z, the 18 to 26-year-olds, who are very concerned about what's going on in the country, but feels that nobody's listening to them or represents them. So how do we engage with them? I happen to have, I didn't actually know this when I stepped up because to stand in Epsom and Ewell. But it turns out that my 2 court cases are taught to anybody who's studying law, economics, PPE, citizenship. So they think they know me, which is quite interesting. But I have an in with that age group, but also they understand that their future requires something like a well-being economy. And they are, and there's one shaking her head here, they are about the easiest to engage in that because they know the way we are working now and operating now, our systems are not fit for their future.
We don't have enough doctors, nurses, dentists, teachers, schools, policemen, road care or repairs, or anything whatsoever to deal with the existing population that exists in this town that has elected the council to represent them, not sell the land that they don't own. Now, I think it would be very important that everybody gets fully informed about what is being done with people that are supposed to represent them, but don't, who are making money and not informing us all about what is going on when it's been requested and it's even been taken to legal levels now to have it extracted from. I find it extremely disturbing. So as you are true, I would like them to be, and I would like you to be a very clear representative for making this happen.
Thank you very much. But when I talk about reforms of cleaning up politics, it is at all levels, including local level, because, our money goes to the councils. And at the moment, not in Epsom, because I can't quite get any of all the data for locally, but there are some 47 councils who are on the brink of bankruptcy. What have they been doing with everyone's money? And who are the officers who advise them? Those meetings with officers are not minuted. We don't know who they are. We don't know how they got their jobs. We don't know how the companies and consultants they're bringing in are appointed. There needs to be so much more transparency at local level to understand where the money is going, who is advising, and who is getting the contracts.
But exactly, one of the main issues is that they are actually planning to expand, increase the number of housing, sell off land that they don't own to private companies, all of which is actually, in my fundamental interpretation, illegal and offensively wrong. So it would be very good that we all get fully informed. And I believe they've been taken to court for this. But to do it with private companies, make money out of things that they don't own, with facilities they're not even maintaining at the current level as they should be.
I think everyone here would agree with you.
I was very pleased to hear your philosophy and vision about wellness.
Thank
and
you.
I totally agree there's a lot of science now in system redesign. So that is a strong message.
Thank
and
you.
you should speak. There are wellness practitioners who are developing lots of good ideas in that area. So that you're on a strong message there. But I wonder why you think Epsom and Ewell is the place where it will work. And in particular, as a sort of sub-question, given this is a Tory stronghold, why you believe you can win in Epsom and Ewell?
Because it's a very strong one nation Tory traditional seat. And when we've gone around and we've done the audits and we talk to people, they don't feel that this Conservative government represents them and that they've left them. The other thing is, it is a Remain seat, and it's actually now polling at about 63% Remain. And so people are not happy about the fact that we left Europe. But I think most importantly, it's an area where it has a provenance for health and well-being. If you look at the 5 cluster hospitals that were here, it already has that in its DNA. It was the biggest mental health institution in Europe at one stage. So it has that in its provenance already. It also has, unusually, it has a high number of community and charity initiatives compared to other areas. People here care and want to do something for each other. There's also, I mean, there's so many factors in this that I've looked into. Because of its proximity to London, it means that actually I can, if I'm in Parliament, I'm going to push like mad that what they do is they actually will fund us as being the pioneering place where we pilot wellness and a well-being economy. I will be pushing every day for the next government to fund however many millions, give us a pilot scheme funded by central government. And if we can make it work, then they can roll it out.
I just wanted to make a comment about that, and thank you for mentioning the mental hospitals. It is a well-being community that was founded here, and primarily because there was green space.
Yes.
And it was the green space that was partly the healing place.
Yes.
So please, could we keep the green space?
The green space is so important to healing, as our coming together the community and not just being for profit. And that's the other thing that's really interesting. When I mentioned in my speech about the idea that we've got Victorian diseases coming back, it is absolutely appalling. But our country has been here before. In Victorian times, the government were not trusted. Institutions were not trusted. And it was philanthropists and business people who stepped up. The Cadburys, the Unilevers, the Clarks, the Charles Dickens, you know, it is people who came together. Businesses, charities, initiatives, Bernardo's. We can do that again. I have every faith that we can actually do that again, that we can bring businesses, charities, public, private sector together, because I don't believe that the public purse or politicians can do it on their own. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you all very much for coming this evening. I hope you have seen and heard that Gina answered every single question in detail, that she understands the needs of this community and has already got into the depths of the local issues, that she's thought about what happens when we bring back principles, integrity. How many people knew that members of parliament don't have a contract? They didn't have to ever turn up for a surgery. It's ridiculous. Companies like Amazon, how many of you used Amazon in the last year? It's not right. They don't pay the same tax as anyone running a small shop in the high street. So we should have a digital tax. That's the way things need to move. So you've heard a lot tonight. I hope it's made you change your mind. I hope it's made you make your mind. If you've got questions that haven't been asked because you didn't want to ask, please write them down, put them on there. Gina will be here for a while. She'll mingle and talk to you so that if you've got specific things, you can take it on in depth. You have very little choice now. We have had one of the worst and most damaging Tory governments in history. They have lost the faith of the middle ground. They're moving off to the right wing. I have no idea what Labour stands for because they won't tell us, but they shout very loud about what they don't do. And sadly, the only reason I remember the Lib Dems were in existence was because of Ed Damey's less transparent role with the post office, which has been on the news. You have an alternative choice. You have a candidate who will represent you, and that's Gina Miller.
Thank you very much, Ian. Just to remind everybody, or just to let everyone know, I have a constituency office. You can find it in the literature. I'm here 3 days a week, every week, some days, some weeks, 4 days a week. In elections called, I'm here all the time. I have a team based in Epsom and Ewell as well. We also are very fortunate. I'm very fortunate in that I have over 30 key volunteers that you can talk to as well. Winning will be hard. I'm never taken on a fight that I think is easy. This one is going to be the hardest fight I've taken on. But I'm offering you my 32 years of experience as a campaigner, my experience as a business person, and as somebody who will not stop fighting for the future of our children. Thank you.